Hello everyone, I am TST's the Mudman, and it's that time of the week again. We've got to figure out what deck we are going to play during this week's weekend ranked event. But there has been a huge balance patch this week. New god powers, core card changes, changes to divine order cards. The meta is brand new, completely different. No one knows what to expect for this weekend, and let's try to figure out some viable decks this week. This is an interesting week because I think that all the gods can be viable. Every single one I think you're going to be able to have a decent weekend with. And before we jump into any decks, there are a handful of changes that we should definitely touch on before we discuss anything about the meta. The first and probably most important thing is Flourish God Power is gone. Flourish Nature was the most powerful and most popular deck for the last couple of weeks. Their God Power used to cost 1 mana, give a creature +1 strength and regen 1. Now it just heals a creature for 1. So it's way weaker, it's totally different. There's a whole bunch of new God Powers that are, creeping up on its space. You're probably not going to see a ton of Flourish Nature anymore, and that changes everything. The next huge change to the meta would be Shieldbearer. This card has been in pretty much every aggro and tempo based deck in Gods Unchained since the beginning of time. It used to be a 1 mana 1/1, now it's a 1 mana 0/1, so technically he is infinitely weaker than he was before. Like, yes, obviously his main power was his roar effect, giving a creature +1/+1, which is still intact. That being said, Shieldbearer can no longer finish off Axewomen. It can't finish off Underbrush Boars. It can't go face for 3 favors so you can access the Sanctum. All it really is taking up a slot on your board and giving your opponent favor at some point, and you can't even buff his attack up with Flourish anymore since that's gone. So I imagine you'll still see a handful of Shieldbearers throughout the weekend, especially on Friday. I imagine you'll see the most Shieldbearers on Friday, and then as the weekend goes on, people will realize just how much weaker Shieldbearer got, and he'll be less and less prevalent. And sure, Shieldbearer is still just as good in the sense of like Out of Its Misery. It's still a great Out of Its Misery target, great Untold Greed or Forbidden Experiment target, but for the most part, Shieldbearer got way, way weaker. It might still see some fringe play, but you are not going to see it in every single deck like you've been used to. And then the next thing we should talk about, maybe the most important change of all, is Guild Enforcer. This is a neutral 5 mana creature. It's a 4/3. It's got frontline and armor 2. This might be, pound for pound, the best creature in the entire game. If you are a control deck, it's going to stop your opponent's assault and make sure you definitely get to 6 or 7 mana. And if you're an aggro deck, it's a 3-attack creature that your opponent has to deal with that's pseudo-indestructible. 2 armor is really, really hard to get through, especially at 5 mana. Buffing this card makes it incredibly strong. It's very similar to pre-nerfed Bronzegate, when it was a 2/4, but it's even better because this creature can attack. It can go face over and over and over again. It can trade off the most important creatures. If you have access to healing, it's incredibly unfair. If you are a Gods Unchained deck that sees 5 mana, which is every deck, then you should be running 2 copies of Guild Enforcer. It's just that good. This card is going to make or break so many games over this weekend. It's incredibly powerful. Alright, so now that we have discussed the, Flourish being gone, Shieldbearer being infinitely weaker, and the emergence of the new strongest card, Guild Enforcer, let's jump into some decks that you might want to play over this weekend. Alright, so the first deck I want to talk about for this weekend is Zombie Death. You might remember 2 weeks ago, we talked about Zombie Death. It was like a fringe deck, sort of like the top of B tier, but this balance patch brought a whole bunch of buffs to this archetype, and it is shot up to A tier deck, maybe even S tier deck. This deck uses one of the new god powers, which is Soulburn God Power. It replaced Undying Wish. This god power is 1 mana, deal 1 damage to both gods, which in a vacuum might sound like the worst god power ever. 1 mana to do a bad thing to you and your opponent. But it's also 1 mana activate Frenzy. Death has a handful of really great Frenzy cards, and most of them heal you in some way, shape, or form, so the 1 damage gets mitigated really easily. And let's see, the first card I'd like to talk about is Necroceptor. You might remember from the last time we talked about Zombie Death, Necroceptor is the best card of that archetype, and this card actually got buffed. So before, it would make 1/1/1 zombie, and if you're frenzied, you would get 2 zombies. Now it makes a 1/1 zombie, and if you're frenzied, you get a 2/2 zombie. So it's the same amount of stats. In some scenarios, a 2/2 is better than 2/1/1s. In other scenarios, 1/1s are better. Obviously that varies. But the big buff is Necroceptor has a new secondary effect. Whenever a zombie goes into your void, your opponent loses 2 favor. So every time they destroy one of your zombies, they only get 1 favor for the kill. And if your zombies make an even trade, like if both creatures die, then your opponent just loses favor, which is really important to make sure they can't get the relic removal in the Sanctum to get rid of your Necroceptor. So it just got, and also, before sometimes it was difficult to activate its Frenzy. Now you can always just do it for 1 mana. It was a huge buff. But you might be thinking, you loved old Necroceptor. You loved making 2 zombies every turn. What are you going to do? Luckily, Cursed Obelisk was also buffed. This is a 3 mana 1/4 with backline, can't attack. And this is essentially the creature equivalent to old Necroceptor. At the end of your turn, summon a 1/1 zombie. If you're frenzied, summon 2 zombies. And like I said before, for the most you have to spend for Frenzy is just 1 mana. If you don't have a creature to activate it, you just do it with your God Power. It's so seamless. And so before, a big issue with Zombie Death is if you didn't get your Necroceptor, you were just way, way weaker. But now, since you have Cursed Obelisk and Necroceptor, you have 4 big zombie generator cards in your deck instead of just 2, making it way more consistent. But the biggest thing is they work so well together. If you have Necroceptor on the board and Cursed Obelisk, which you can do, you can pip into one of them on turn 2 and play the other one on turn 3 and either pip into a God Power or go face with a creature and just have it all set up so early. But if you have both up, you get 1 2/2 zombie and 2 1/1 zombies at the end of every single turn. So you get 4/4 in stats with Leech. You have 3 bodies on the board guaranteed, which makes it so the back line is really relevant for this Obelisk. And it's just these 2 cards generate you so many creatures that you just don't really need other creatures. It's an incredible combo. And since you are generating 3 creatures at most, or 3 creatures at least a turn, Neferu's Will is really powerful. Capitalize on those huge boards by getting rid of all your stupid zombies, buffing something up to being really huge, and then you just remake the zombies afterwards because you still have Necroceptor. And a big part of this deck is the Guild Enforcer. We already talked about it. This is like the single best card. And this card is crazy in combination with Neferu's Will. It's really hard to remove Guild Enforcer when you play it on curve. So you drop it on turn 5 or pip into it on turn 4. You're generating a bunch of zombies. You go face with your zombies. You play Neferu's Will. This gets buffed up to be so huge and have overkill and 2 armor, and you definitely win. This deck got way stronger. Oh, also, if you're ever in a position where you're actually losing the board somehow, you never got your Cursed Obelisk, they somehow got rid of your Necroceptors, you can always just fall back on good old Neferu to clear the board every single turn, maintain your health total with all the zombies you generate, and just a really solid deck. This deck got way, way stronger post balance change. Definitely one you should think about for the weekend rank. So War is the next god I'd like to talk about. Aggressive Slayer War has been real popular the last couple of weeks, but staple Slayer Ward card, Balka's Captain got nerfed recently. All of aggro got nerfed with the Shieldbearer nerf, and the existence of Guild Enforcer really weakens the Slayer archetype as well as just all other early game archetypes. So I don't think Slayer War is the way to go, but War definitely has a place in the meta right now. This is like a mid-rangey control war deck. I've been calling it Blitz War because it has so many blitz creatures. Some of the more notable ones are Orcish Elite. This card recently got buffed. It used to be a 5 mana 2/5 with Blitz and Twin Strike. Now it's a 3/6, which is just way, way bigger. This kills off 2 creatures whenever you play it easily. It's very reminiscent to Trojan Battle Mage back when Onslaught was a thing. It should be able to kill 2 Black Jaguars. It kills a Pyramid Warden. It does a lot. It's very comparable to Anus, which is a 6-mana legendary card. This card got a huge buff. This is really powerful. It's also important to note that War had 1-mana Blitz creatures with Axewoman, had 2-mana ones with Tavern Brawler, 4 manas with Archangel Bruiser, as well as Viking Longship, but it was missing the 5-mana slot, and now it has this great 5-mana Blitzer and Orcish Elite, and it also has Ravenous Chimera, which also was recently buffed. Before, it was like a 5-mana 5/3 with some keywords. Now it's a 3/4 with Blessed, Leech, and Blitz, which is really, really great. Blessed is a strong keyword in general. Being able to access the Sanctum is always powerful. And then Blitz and Leech, obviously an amazing combination. Killing off a creature as well as maintaining your health total is really strong. It also pairs well with Hector, so your Hector can have Leech, which obviously you want. And like I said before, Control War was missing great cards at the 5-mana slot, and now they have 2 different great 5-mana Blitz creatures. Let's see. We've got the Guild Enforcer, of course, another one of the recently buffed cards. This will be in pretty much every single deck we show off. It's just the best card. One interesting thing you may notice is the Militant Gladiator. There are actually no spells in this entire deck. You got a couple of relics, mostly just all creatures. I have this in the deck right here just so I can apply some pressure, maybe get some of my slower opponents to 0. But if you wanted to replace this with another relic or just any other card, this is sort of the flex spot. I just thought since there were no spells in the deck already, I'd be remiss not to throw a Militant Gladiator in there. Xanthus is in the deck for a similar note. There's almost all creatures, so this is a great buff card. Most of your creatures have Blitz, so buffing attack is really great for Blitz creatures. If they don't have Blitz, they have Protected, and buffing the attack of a protected creature is also really strong. This deck just really controls the board super well. It has a ton of healing, so you can get low and come back up. You've obviously got the demos for more healing. If you're playing in a slower matchup, which will definitely happen this weekend, considering the meta got way slower, Jason will help out in those. This is just a very solid, control-y, mid-range deck for War. It's been working out really well for me, and could be a great selection for this weekend. Now let's move on to Nature. As I said in the beginning of the video, Flourish is gone, so the old aggressive Flourish Nature decks we've gotten used to are out of here. This is a mid-range control-y Nature deck. It's very similar to the Nature deck I showed off in last week's video, but one big change is there is a new God Power for Nature in Selena's Mark. It deals 1 damage to a random enemy creature and heals your god for 1. So it's very control-y in nature, great for a control nature archetype. And some important changes from this deck, from the one that we featured last week, is with Shieldbearer being nerfed. Shieldbearer is out of here, and since there's less Shieldbearers, and this is a higher curve deck in general, the Marshwalkers have also been removed since you're way less likely to buff those Marshwalkers up. We do still have the Netherborn Binders, which I think should be superior to Marshwalker just for the early game trades. Still got the Chiron because it's great against Necroceptors, great against War. War always has relics. Light has relics. Relics are very prevalent. Chiron's always good. We've got the obvious ones, got the Underbrush Boar. You might be thinking that Finian Fruitbearer is an aggro card. What's he doing in a mid-range control-y deck? Well, I would argue that Finian Fruitbearer is not just an aggro card, he's just good. He has a ton of stats for 2 mana, so if your opponent has creatures, he controls the board state, and if your opponent doesn't have creatures, he controls their face. Same thing can be true, or can be said of Mooncray Cyclops. Not just an aggro card, just a great card. If you want your deck to be great, you gotta run the great cards. Same thing's true with Guild Enforcer. This is just gonna be in every deck. It's super great 5-drop. It's going to guarantee you get to 6 mana, so you'll be able to play the Hunt, be able to play your Giant Pangolins, then your demos, all that good stuff. You may have noticed there are 2 Giant Pangolins in the deck now. That's a difference from last week. The whole meta should slow down a bit, so you're going to want more of those big, more expensive, high-impact creatures like the Giant Pangolin. Still got the Demonologist in there to cycle through your deck to get the demos. Demos still probably going to be one of your more important creatures, and Nature does not have access to much card draw, so Demonologist is quite good. And then you've got your Jason for your late game in a can. Very similar to the Nature deck from last week, but definitely powered up because of that Guild Enforcer and because of the new God Power, which will be really powerful. It's just substantially better at controlling the board than something like an Animal Bond would. And yeah, Nature definitely could be a good deck to play this weekend. I know a lot of new players are very experienced with Nature. So yeah, Nature's definitely one you should keep in mind. Now we are on to Light. And Light got significantly stronger in this most recent balance patch. And you might be thinking to yourself right now, Mudman, that's not true. Light only got one card buffed, and that card's not even in this deck. And you'd be absolutely right. But a bunch of the peripheral changes to the meta have substantially improved Light's position. Light is a one-trick pony type of a deck. It plays creature-centric zoo decks, and that's it. And if you let Light do what it wants to do, it is incredibly strong. It's one reason why it got substantially better is Flourish Nature is no longer around. Flourish Nature was incredibly good at controlling the early board state and stopping Light from doing what it wanted to do. Now that that is less prevalent, Light will definitely be able to find a much better foothold in the meta. Another big advantage for Light is the loss of Shieldbearer. Shieldbearer used to be the bane of Light's existence. There are a ton of really great early game creatures that have 2 attack, most notably Pyramid Warden, but also things like Master Tactician, Wild Hog, Skeleton Heavies, and Warmonger Smiths. Just, the list goes on. Lots of really great 2 attack creatures that would all get buffed out of Light's Levy range with Shieldbearer. And now that Shieldbearer is less prevalent, Light's Levy got substantially better. And like I said before, Flourish Nature's gone. Slayer War is probably either gone or will be way less prevalent. The best way to stop Light is by also having a strong board presence in the early game. And if the 2 best early game decks are no longer around, then Light is really, really powerful. You may have noticed that there are no Protected Benedictions and no Asteriuses in this deck, which is definitely strange because those are some really great cards. But the reason for that is I have a lot of 3 attack creatures in this deck with the Bright Mage, the Highborn Knights, the Dogs, and the few 2 attack creatures I have I intend to buff with Radiant Dawn, which will get it out of that Asteria/Protected Benediction range. And you don't really need those when you have Radiant Dawn. Just a really powerful AoE buff card. Like we've been saying this whole video, the meta is getting slower, which means there's going to be more demos and more sleep around. And this card is just an AoE buff that also wakes everything up. It's really, really great. Since the meta is going to be slower, you're going to need to get some more resources, which you can definitely do with Golden Harp plus High Thermaturge or CERN to get lots of cards from your deck. Also, CERN, High Thermaturge plus the Heal God Power can generate you resources. Golden Harp in general is also really good in a slower meta, seeing as it's 1 card that creates 3 creatures over multiple turns. It's a high value single card. And High Thermaturge and CERN are a really great combination, like better than just double High Thermaturge. Because on 6 mana, you can play High Thermaturge and then CERN to heal up your entire board and draw 2 cards for each creature, even without the Golden Harp. And with the Golden Harp, you have the card draw begets card draw theory. So if you play CERN on 4 and then Golden Harp, you'll probably be able to draw a High Thermaturge. Maybe you play CERN on 4 and then play High Thermaturge and Golden Harp on turn 5 and just completely reload. You get the picture. Drawing cards is good, especially if you're an aggro deck. And then another important thing to note is the Guild Enforcer. Just like all the other decks, he's in here, but Guild Enforcer is particularly good in Light. Mainly because Light has lots of buff cards. Blind Martyr buff plus Guild Enforcer is crazy. Canonize on a Guild Enforcer, obviously crazy. Radiant Dawn continues to be crazy. But even just the Heal God Power. Usually it takes multiple turns to get rid of Guild Enforcer, and you usually chip away at it. And if you can attack a 3 attack creature and then heal it back up to full over and over again, your opponent's just never going to kill Guild Enforcer, and that means you win the game. So Light definitely got way stronger. If you have any experience playing Light, this is a very similar play style to all other Light decks in the past. So this could definitely be a good choice for weekend ranked deck. Magic is the next domain I'd like to talk about, and this isn't just any Magic deck, this is Structure Magic. That's right, the meme of Structure Magic might actually be a real deck with this latest balance patch. I'm just as surprised as you are. I saw a couple of great players getting great success with Structure Magic. I put together a deck, and this deck so far is 12 wins, 0 losses, 100% win rate, and the games haven't even been close. It's just been dominating everything around it. There haven't been a ton of buffs to this archetype. The main one is the All-Seeing Spire. This is a 3-mana 0/2. It used to be a 4-mana card. It's got Order 10 at the start of your turn, force C1. At the end of your turn, draw a card. So ideally, you get a bonus card every single turn, which is obviously really, really great. It has 2 health, which is pretty easy to deal with. The order makes it so you have to use spells, which is relevant because you have a ton of order cards in this deck. So eventually your opponent is going to run out of spells to deal with your order stuff, or they'll run out of spells and they won't be able to deal with your Guild Enforcer or your Fortified Acropolis, something along those lines. But let's see, what are the important parts of this deck? You got the Sip of Elixir, which ramps you into your really strong 5, 6, and 7 mana cards. Demetrios, obviously really great. He's in pretty much all Magic decks nowadays because he's, he deals damage, he draws cards. It's pretty much all you want. Monolith of the Storms is really, really powerful. 5 mana, 5/5, order 10. It's important to remember that even if you're ordered, you can still use abilities, so you don't need to wait until his order goes to 0 before you can make use of his amazing effect. But he is a 5/5 who gets +2 attack every time you play a spell, and then his ability is deal damage equal to his attack to whatever source you want, and then his attack goes down to 0. This card deals a ton of damage. He's fairly hard to remove because of the order. Your opponent's probably used a bunch of spells already getting rid of your other order cards, and this card is just super strong. It's one of your main win conditions. Fortified Acropolis is another one of your main win conditions. 6 mana 3/6 with backline and ward ability. Deal X damage +2, where X is the number of structures you control. You usually have 2 or 3 structures, oftentimes 3, sometimes more. The fact of the matter is, Fortified Acropolis does a lot of damage when you play it. Then you have the Demo, which beats any aggro deck, by itself. And since you have so much frontline in this deck, and removal and ramp, it's really easy to get to Demo. But the glue that holds this deck together, unsurprisingly, is really Guild Enforcer. Because you play Guild Enforcer on 5, and it pretty much guarantees you get to 6 mana, which guarantees you can play the Labyrinth Guard, which is a huge, giant wall of a structure for your opponents to get through. So if you play this, it means you definitely survive to 7, which means you can play Demo, and Demo is your best card. Also, a cool synergy with Guild Enforcer is Guild Enforcer plus Stormfield is really strong. This is an AoE spell, deals 2 damage to each creature without order, and then you give +1 spell boost to each of your living creatures. So all your order creatures become big spell boost cards, but since it's 2 damage, it deals 0 damage to Guild Enforcer, and so you can just give Guild Enforcer spell boost. So you can make your Ancient Text deal extra damage, or for your Demetrios' Draft deal extra damage, or turn a Tracking Bolt crazy. You get the picture. Maybe it would behoove you to take something out and throw on a Jason for more value in case you run into a lot of control matchups. I have played against Board Wipe Death and Sleep Deception, and it always seems to get there. The deck has been surprisingly good. If you like Magic, you like frontline creatures, then this could be the deck for you. I mean, 100% win rate numbers don't lie, right? Sleep Deception is the last archetype I want to go over for this weekend ranked video. This deck is very, very similar to the Sleep Deception deck I've been showing off the last 2 weeks with just some slight modifications. The first one and most obvious one is we've added 2 Guild Enforcers. As you should do with all of your decks, we replaced the Bronze Gates with 2 Guild Enforcers because they both have frontline, and this one is just better. The only other change that we have made is this deck used to run 2 Ashen Drakes and 2 Orpheos Guiles. I now have 1 Ashen and 1 Guile. If you want 2 Ashens and no Guiles, or vice versa, do whatever you want, but the main thing to note is now we have 2 Cutthroat Insights in here. Deception is at its best during a control meta because of cards like Cutthroat Insight. You still got all your great sleep and stall and destroy tools, but if the meta is slower, we're going to see a lot more late game decks, and Cutthroat Insight is crazy good against that. God's Having Ward no longer blocks Cutthroat Insight, so if you are going to be in a lot of mirror matches, or you're going to play against board wipe death a lot, or control nature, or control what have you, Cutthroat just lets you take whatever they're working towards, and now it's yours. You can take their Pachyria's Monster, you can take their Dionysus, you can take their Helion Elite, list goes on. The fact of the matter is, if control is going to be prevalent, then Cutthroat Insight becomes really, really great. Sleep Deception was already a strong archetype, and if it can get use out of Cutthroat, that's definitely good news for Deception. I guess we should probably know that Exercise did get nerfed. It used to put everything to sleep and draw you a card. Now it just puts you to sleep, so it's sort of like a strictly worse version of Elixir of the Panther. All in all, I think you still run 2 of them. If you were running 2 Exercises and 1 Elixir of the Panther before, you probably swap the ratio now. But the sleep part is the most important thing, of the card Exercise, and Control Deception as a whole has the Flip God power, which is really good for just putting the cards you don't want back in your deck and drawing the cards you do want. So it's not like card draw was a particularly big issue for Sleep Deception. That being said, not drawing a card is a big deal. This card did get weaker, but as a whole, I think Deception got stronger. It too got Guild Enforcer, so its anti-aggro game increased in strength. And if we're going to be seeing more control decks, then Cutthroat Insight is crazy good. Sleep Deception is definitely a good potential archetype for this weekend. Alright, so we've talked about the meta. We've looked at a deck for every single god. What are we going to do this weekend? What are the conclusions? What deck should we play? Well, personally, I think the new and improved super strong Soulburn Zombie deck is really powerful, really fun. That could totally be a great deck. If you are experienced with Light, though, Light got a huge buff. The playstyle is the same as it's always been. I think Light is really, really powerful. But you can't count out the fact that Structure Magic has literally never lost a game. 100% win rate. As of right now, totally unbeatable. So, honestly, I think any of the decks we discussed, Sleep Deception, Structure Magic, Zoo Light, Mid-Range Control Nature, Blitz War. Blitz War also super easy to play. If you've got the cards for Blitz War and you just want a nice, relaxed, easy win spree, Blitz War is definitely good. Yeah, but the fact of the matter is all of these decks are pretty powerful. The zombies, I think, are cool and exciting. Light's probably like the easiest, best deck to play at the moment, but if you're looking for fun, definitely zombies or that structure meme goodness. But whatever you do, have fun. Tell us how you did in the TST Discord and have a wonderful day. Hey, you! Did you know that subscribing to the TST YouTube channel will increase your win rate by 6.9%? So what are you waiting for? Subscribe to the channel and hit the bell for notifications. And while you're at it, equip Scythe of the Harvest and attack the like button directly in the face. Bye-bye!